Thanks, Oka, and thank you, Marin, for being here. It is really a thrill. I've been so lucky to have worked with Marin many times in my previous role as Director of Music at South Bank Centre in London, where she's an associate artist. And the projects that we've done together, which I hope we'll get to talk about a bit this evening, are some of the most exciting, some of the most excellent, and the most inclusive because of the way together we've designed them, inspired by Marin, that I've ever been involved with. Marin is, as Oka said, a musician at the top of her game. She's conducting the Conservatorium this week, so that in itself, of course, makes that statement as a testament to that. She's also a pioneer, as Oka has mentioned. She was the first woman to conduct a major American orchestra, the Baltimore Symphony. She was the first woman to conduct that great British institution, the last night of the proms. And I think you're the first woman to lead an orchestra in Vienna, is that right? To lead a major orchestra in Vienna, as far as we know, maybe, which is that cradle or bastion, choose your metaphor, of our Western classical tradition. But everywhere Marin goes, we'll talk about her life in music. She has fused the highest level of artistry, and used that platform to make a difference. We've just seen you conduct a masterclass with some young students, and I was just struck again by that absolute detail and rigor that you apply to anything. It was really thrilling to be in that small room and see that in action up close, about how you just make you influence the sound, the tone color, and the feeling of the sound just with a simple way you hold your hand. It
but
was really interesting to see
a
that.
lot of young conductors. Hello, everybody. A lot, just to jump in, a lot of young conductors don't think enough about how impactful our gesture and how we can influence the sound and the rhythm and the balance
Mhm.
without talking about it. But really, it's amazing if I have a concept of a sound. Usually, if I'm thinking it, they play it.
Yeah.
Without it's an unconscious response from the musicians.
Mhm.
But we have to be so rigorous about our responsibility, technical responsibility,
Mhm.
and be vigilant about it.
But you say it's unconscious, but you've obviously learned over the
No,
years
hopefully it's unconscious for the
for them.
musicians.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
us, it's extremely
yeah.
conscious.
There was one point this afternoon where you said, just hold it there because that sound needs to be icy. And it was a very powerful thing to to see you demonstrate how to achieve that sound. Um, Tell us about what's going on with the Royal Concertgebouw this week. You've started rehearsals. How's that going? And how's that relationship with the orchestra?
Yeah, the orchestra's wonderful. It's a lot of new people since the last time. Yeah, as I said, it's great that you hire me every 20 years or so. I think I was here about 15 years ago. But maybe I'll tell you this story. It was so, they had all the press, and first woman to ever conduct a full-length concert with the Concertgebouw. And, oh yeah, it was, no, first woman to conduct. And then they said, no, we had a Dutch woman in 1893. And I said to them then, oh, well, you need a woman every 100 years or
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
no matter what. They didn't think it was very funny. But anyway, then they had to change their press release to say, this is all generated by the orchestras. I don't care.
Mhm.
It's such an absurd thing to be known for. It's like the first 5'4" conductor.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's comparable to that for me.
yeah.
I mean, I had nothing to do with it. But anyway, that's the orchestra is it's a lots of young players
Mhm.
now, and I thought they were very tolerant and responsive because I worked all on the new music today. I'm doing John Adams's Fearful Symmetries, which is a difficult piece in most acoustics, but especially in this one because it's all about the groove, and there are a couple synthesizers. So we worked mostly on that and a short piece, an opening piece by Jesse Montgomery for strings. So
Who's
tomorrow
a
is
young American composer.
yeah, tomorrow's a Bartok Concerto for Orchestra.
Yeah, which we just had in the masterclass with some students from here. Marin, you always strike me as someone who just loves what they do, and I'm full of admiration for your work ethic. Even today, you fill your spare slot with doing a masterclass here and doing this talk. Can you tell us about what's your approach to that idea of working hard? I mean, you do seem to work hard, but you also have a life, you have a balance, you have a family, you make life work somehow.
I think my family would take really that's debatable. They would say, I'm sure. Yeah, but I've always been a hard worker. I think my parents were very devoted. They were both professional musicians, and they never missed a rehearsal, never missed a concert
Yeah.
their whole careers. And in addition, my father built houses and concert halls, and with his hands, and he'd come in to play a concerto with cement under his fingernails. And my mother was also very hardworking person. So I think I come by that naturally. But I also think that when a person is told that they can't do something, that there's no opportunity, and that's what I was told so many times. That you can't be a conductor because women or girls don't do that. They can't do that. And then I was told, well, you can't be a conductor because you don't play piano. There's always some kind of reason. I'm a violinist, and then I think that also um, enabled me to understand how precious every opportunity was.
Yeah.
And so I applied myself, 1000%, because unlike my friends, my male conducting friends who had opportunities here and there and they could kind of blow it off and go drinking and stuff, I realized that I only had one chance. And so I had to maximize it. So I think I really learned that hard work ethic. And now I'm trying to learn um, how to relax. It's not going well, but I'm trying. This is my vacation, you see,
Yeah.
with you here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Making the most of each opportunity, it's clear that you really do that. Another thing I noticed looking at your biography and also watching, I would absolutely recommend you watch. There's a wonderful film that was made a couple of years ago about Marin called The Conductor, a 90-minute documentary. And I watched it again this week in preparation. And that fact that people said no to you, as you've just said, and you were turned down, was it 3 times for the Juilliard conducting course? But what you then did, as well as make the most of every opportunity, was make your own things happen. You were clearly a leader. And one of those that's so brilliantly portrayed on the film, one of those opportunities that you made for yourself was starting a string swing band, which I don't know how this footage happens. It's an amazing piece of footage. And there's you out in front, clearly leading it, clearly relishing it. It's also all women, but you were making that
Well,
happen.
this was really just a sort of a side hustle for
Yeah.
me because I needed to also make some money.
Mhm.
And so I thought classical music might be too square for me, and too rigid and too many rules and all this no and don't smile and don't move and don't have fun. And so I thought maybe I could be a rock and roll musician. That was my plan B. And but in like 1980, rock and roll violin, it just was not a happening thing. So I met a guy who said, I said, oh, I want to make a rock band, with string players, it's crazy. And he said, well, I can play, I can write you some swing music. So I said, oh, that's great. Let's do swing. So that's how it happened. It was really just
Mm.
because Gary, my friend,
Yeah.
could write some swing music. But the thing that nobody knows is that, of course, none of us knew how to swing because we all were trained at Juilliard. So, we didn't actually understand you had to swing music. So we rehearsed the first time, and, all my friends are playing, and I can see them looking at each other like, okay, this is terrible. And
Mhm.
she's lost her mind. And then Gary came back, and oh my God, I wish I had there were smartphones then, because he laughed. I never heard anyone laugh so hard because we were playing everything like it was Mozart, and it was just awful. And anyway, and my friends were like, oh, this is a stupid idea. Let's not do this. No, 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 come on, let's do it. So we got together every night after our gigs, and we'd play and we'd listen to jazz. And then I got us a gig at a jazz club in New York.
Yeah.
I'd never even been in a jazz club. And I went to every jazz club in New York, and I found one that was run by a woman. And I said, okay, this is the one. I have a 14-piece, all-woman string swing band. She said, okay. And so we played there, and we played there for many, many years, every Thursday night. All 14 of us on the tiny, stage for a trio. And all these commercial writers started coming in and listening to us and started writing us music. And I figured out and started improvising. And so I had an incredible career as a recording musician because I could improvise. And and so that was really, uh, it was just, sort of happenstance. It was really my plan B because I still wanted to be a conductor. And what happened was, through my band, we played at a wedding. And the guy getting married is a guy named Tomio Taki, a Japanese businessman who owned Anne Klein clothing. And anyway, he paid me in cash. So I thought he would be a good candidate to help me start an orchestra. And so I called him up and I said, can I take you for a drink? And I thought, well, what do I have to lose? And I said, Mr. Taki, all I want to do is be a conductor. He said, oh, I really don't like classical music. And I said, that's okay, as long as you support the orchestra. He said, okay. So he supported my orchestra. So I founded an orchestra. And all my friends from String Fever, that's our swing band, played in the orchestra. And I had been rejected from Juilliard 3 times. So I decided to start the orchestra in Alice Tully Hall, which is the hall that Juilliard uses.
Yeah.
So it just felt appropriate to me. And but the best thing was that the orchestra was, it was all my friends from school and friends of friends, and it was this kind of thing. And they really taught me how to conduct.
Mhm.
They would give me feedback. Oh, that works. That doesn't work. Don't apologize. Don't talk so much. Do this. Don't do that. But it was always done in a very constructive and positive way.
Mm.
And so that orchestra, it was called Concordia, and we were together for 18 years.
And that seems to me, I mean, thinking about the young people who are here, that's an inspiring thing to um, seize that opportunity yourself, but also really authentic thing to make music with friends.
Yeah.
And so many great musical things have happened. Orchestras, ensembles have started because groups of friends get together with
Yeah.
a genuine desire
No,
to,
you're
make
you're
music.
so right. And my swing band, we played together for 20 years,
Mhm.
and we're still best friends. And we have a reunion every year. We don't play, but we drink. And but I think that's what music is about. It's about relationships
Yeah.
and connecting with people. Not just in the playing realm, but in the audience
Yeah.
as well.
And you clearly you were clearly a leader, right from the early video that I saw in the film of you leading the swing band. But you clearly had developed somehow this confidence to stand up there in front of people or to lead, in the case of the string band, to lead that group. Where do you think that came from? How did you develop that as a young person growing up? The idea that, because I never felt that as a young musician. Um, it takes something very special to believe that you can.
I think that there's so many different types of leadership, um, that, but I think when you're born with this sort of drive to lead, you just know it. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it doesn't really matter, but it's something you have to do. And I think that it's interesting because a lot of my conducting students I would consider to be quite introverted, but they know that they want to lead.
Yeah.
And I think they want to connect with a broader group of people.
So another really important thing that happened to you quite early on was meeting Leonard Bernstein. Um, I think it was 1989. Is that right? Late, yeah,
87, I met him.
87.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he became your mentor, really, I suppose, in the last few years of his life.
Mhm.
Um, could you tell us a bit about what that meant? How did it affect you, and what did it mean to you?
Yeah. Well, he was, when I was 9 years old, I saw him conduct. My dad took me to see him conduct, and I just, I fell in love with him. I thought, this is it. He is it. And I had two posters in my bedroom, one of the Beatles and one of Leonard Bernstein. So that says it all. And um, so he was the reason I wanted to be a conductor. And so I followed everything he did because, of course, I lived in New York and he was with New York Phil. And I always dreamt of studying with him someday, but I was terrified to even meet him because, when you have a hero and an idol, you almost don't want that destroyed or taken
Mhm.
away. But I was accepted to Tanglewood, and he became my teacher, and
Mm.
it was just an incredible connection. I was absolutely terrified. I was sure I was going to have a heart attack because I was so excited. And as soon as he started teaching me, just all the cameras and all the people just went away.
Mhm.
It was so personal and so intense. And we had this incredibly deep connection. And I
Mm.
spent a lot of time with him in New York and then travel with him.
Mm.
But I think it's so important that um, young people have mentors and people that will be there for them. And I think Bernstein, the greatest things he gave me, I mean, besides the discussion of music, was a sort of a sense of evaluation. He respected me. And when somebody like Leonard Bernstein values what you're doing, it really makes a difference. But he also taught me a lot of non-musical things because he was deeply engaged in being a citizen of the world and how he would stand up for causes that he believed in. Even if I disagreed with him, he had a moral and ethical compass.
Yeah.
I don't know how he would survive today,
Yeah.
really, but he um, he was a great thinker. He loved words, loved games.
Yeah.
And then I remember we were in Japan, and it was it was early for him, but late for me. It was probably 3 in the morning, and I said something about there was a phrase from a Schumann symphony we were talking about, and I said, "Oh, that reminds me of the Beatles song P.S. I Love You," and he said, "Oh, I love that one," and he went over to the piano and he played. It must have taken 2 hours. He played every single Beatles song. He knew every lyric. He was
Yeah.
just so well rounded,
Mhm.
and not just highbrow.
Yeah.
He was lowbrow too.
Well, that's in his own music as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? You've got all the symphonic works, and then you've got those Broadway tunes that everybody knows.
Yeah, but
Um,
what kind of genius, I mean, it's to me, it is commensurate with Beethoven, who's another hero of mine, that you take a tritone, and because that's the interval of conflict that needs resolution, and that becomes the basis of West Side Story, which is
yeah.
all about conflict.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
genius.
Even the love song starts with a
Every
triangle.
everything in it is about the tritone. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm interested actually because it's clear, I think, from everything you say about him that he taught you. You've just said it. He taught you about being a citizen of the world. He taught you this, or he inspired you. I'm sure it was there already. That it was a good thing to be. It was an okay thing to be like a world class artist and also really care about social justice um, and equality, which he was a pioneer in that, as I
Hmm.
understand, in Broadway, insisting on multiracial cast for on the town, and before anybody would have done that. Um, I'm really interested also. I don't think I've ever talked to you about this, about more about what you learned from him. What's the essence of what you learned from him musically? Was it repertoire? Was it physical presence? Was it
No, it
poetry?
was
Was
none of those things. It was really all about storytelling. He was
Mhm.
the greatest storyteller. Even if he didn't know the story, he made it up. He
Yeah.
was a really wonderful storyteller. And I never forget watching him when I was a teenager. I used to go to the rehearsals at New Yorkville, and he was conducting a Haydn symphony. And he said to the members of the New York Philharmonic, "Do I have to tell you the story of this piece?" And they all said, "Oh yes, please, please." They were
Yeah.
like little kids again,
Yeah.
wanting to hear him tell them a story. And I think that's the most important thing, is that music is about narrative. And as a conductor, it's our responsibility to find that narrative that's authentic and true to the composer. And that's our that really falls on us, and
Mm.
it's our responsibility. And everything's about storytelling in
Mhm.
human interaction.
And again, going back to the masterclass we've just had, I saw you doing that with the young conductors. I saw you, what are you trying to say here? Or, don't just do the same thing in that section and absolutely about storytelling. So that's really interesting to hear about that. So after, you've had lots of different positions, and eventually, I think it was 2005, you became music director of Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, um, a major American orchestra. Um, and Baltimore, you did great things there with, I love, some of the Mahler recordings and other recordings and fantastic concerts, and took them all around the world and really upped their game. Um, But also Baltimore is one of those American cities that's so divided, isn't it, culturally,
Mm.
in terms of inequality and a huge social gap between people who might naturally go to the symphony orchestra and the rest of that city. Um, and it seems to me that you really sort of tried to tackle that straight away. Um, would you like to say something about how you did that?
Sure. Well, Baltimore, I mean, I was struck again, as I'm often struck about the lack of diversity in orchestras, and particularly in American orchestras. And Baltimore is a city of, I think, 68% African American, and we had one black musician in the orchestra, and she'd been there for 30 years. So there wasn't really, um, I didn't see a future that would vary from that too much. And I really started thinking about um, wh- what enables us to become artists. And of course, it's all about opportunity. And I was very conscious of that too, about creating opportunity. And I really believe, especially I became a parent quite late in life, in my 40s, and I think that when you when you have a child, you realize that every child is born a genius, and then we just suck it out of them. Somehow society just, drags them down. But if you set expectations and give them the tools, any kid can be a genius. And I sort of started thinking about how could I test this out a little bit. And so I decided to start a program um, in the schools, and we call it ORCIDS, Orchestra Kids, ORCIDS. And I started with, I finally, it took a lot of talking to everybody, and I started with 30 first graders. And I decided to give them the things that I didn't have when I started an instrument. I had to play piano first, and I hated the piano. And so they have a chance to try different instruments and pick their instrument, because I think there's an instrument for every child. I didn't learn to improvise until I had my swing band. So they all improvise, and they all learn how to compose early, and they all learn percussion. And I always wanted to be a drummer. So I tried to give them the things that I didn't have and the opportunities. And I mean, the program now has, I think, almost 2,500 kids playing musical instruments. And many of those kids from the first class have now graduated from college with degrees in music
Wow.
performance, music education, music management. And if I had a favorite audience, it would be these orchids, because they can come and listen to a piece by John Adams and totally get it, and they're just, I'm really proud of them. So, and this has really, I think, changed the relationship of the orchestra to the
Yeah.
community. A lot of their parents work for the program. And one thing I never got to do was I wanted to start a choir with the parents of the
Yeah.
orchids,
Yeah.
but I didn't have time. So
There was actually, you just reminded me, this is many years ago, but it's continued. There was a music education project in the East End of London, um, and I was slightly involved in it. And the parents were always like hanging around,
right,
and they started getting jealous of the kids
that's
doing
right.
this.
That's why.
So they started their own orchestra called the East London Late Starters Orchestra. And I mean, you don't really necessarily want to hear it that often, but it is an amazing thing. Just people taking up string instruments at in their 40s. But I'm interested in what effect you mentioned that it's had a good effect on the orchestra. I mean, I guess, when you look at orchestras in communities, in big cities particularly, I mean, it's the same. I'm, talking a lot to orchestras in the UK, and if you're in a city like Birmingham or Liverpool or Glasgow or Baltimore or Chicago, I mean, those orchestras and perhaps the opera companies they're the biggest, best funded, in a sense, cultural institutions. So I think it's a very exciting thing that they're somehow convening and encouraging all sorts of music making in that community. But do you think it also, what were the benefits for the orchestra was there a feedback? Do you think it benefits the musicians? I mean, how involved are the musicians in that? Does
Well,
it
I mean,
benefit them?
these are complicated questions, of
Mm,
course, and they're very they're complicated because every institution um, has a lot of baggage,
yeah.
that they're dragging around. And so I would say that when I left, I finished as music director in 2019, I think, something like that. And I think when I left, they could own the program in a different
Yeah.
way. I think they were able to take ownership, because I was so directly connected to the program.
Yeah.
So now I think the program has a real chance to infiltrate the whole orchestra.
Yeah.
I mean, I can encourage from a distance because I'm still connected to the orchestra. I'd like them to maybe create some apprentice positions within the orchestra
Mm,
for the super talented kids
mhm.
and mentor them directly like that. But I think now the program will really take off
Yeah.
now that I left.
Yeah.
So
That's a
that
very,
happens often, I
it
think.
does, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a very generous thing to say. It's a very generous idea. Um, so we did talk at the beginning about the gender thing, and we don't need to labor it too much. But one of the things I mentioned, the last night, the proms, and I remember you saying it's a bit, because if anybody's, I suppose most of you might have seen it on the television. I think it's international. It's international.
Yeah, I think so.
And the conductor's expected to give a speech as part of the ritual of this great British jamboree. And Marin said something like, it's a bit depressing, actually, that there are still firsts for women in 2013, which is what it was. And you you never leave it at that, though. I mean, you're not. You are in this position of pioneer, which I'm sure is a double-edged sword in some ways. But what you've done with that is create opportunities for other people, including, I've been involved with the South Bank with master classes for women conductors with orchestras. But you have your fellowship, the Taki Concordia. I take it
It's
that's
Taki Alsop now.
yeah,
Yeah.
Taki Alsop, right? Okay.
So, remember Mr. Taki, who helped
Yeah.
me start my orchestra?
Yeah.
So when we decided, when the board said, I said, listen, go on, hire somebody else, because I was too busy. It was getting too busy. And they said, no, we're finished now. And Mr. Taki said to me, okay, so look, now you're a conductor. And he said, but what are you going to do for all the other women? And I thought, oh God, now what? So I started a fellowship. I wanted to say thank you to him. I still think he doesn't like classical music, but he's still alive, and thank heavens. And he lives in Hawaii now. But we're in touch often. And so he said, what are you going to do? So I really thought about it, and I decided to start a fellowship for women conductors, and name it after him, to say thank you, but also a fellowship that would create the opportunities that I didn't have. So, to create a chance to fail, this is very important. If you only have one opportunity, you can't afford to fail. But if you have a few and they're not so high profile maybe, and somebody's protecting you, so I try to take the Taki Fellows around to different orchestras with me and conduct a piece here or there. I don't know if she's here now. Elena, are you here? Yeah, here's our most recent Taki Fellow. Stand up so that everyone can see you. Elena Haron is, she's from the Czech Republic, and she's the first woman to head a Czech orchestra. Isn't that awesome? And she's here assisting me this week, and the CvA needed to work on a new piece with a composer, and she conducted them today.
There you go.
So that's pretty awesome,
Wow.
and it went well. And she'll be coming with me to the Chicago Symphony and do an opening piece on a program. So it's about creating these chances that aren't make or break, but you can kind of get to know the orchestra. And so now we have, after these many years, we have 36 of the Taki awardees, and they now have each other, which is the most amazing part. So there's a whole community now. And, you think, well, do you really need that now? Because there are more women conducting. But I think now we need it more than ever, because it's still a struggle to figure out how do you balance, personal life and work. As a woman, it's much more challenging, of course, than because you need, if you want to have children, it's, during this, all these kinds of things. So I think that's probably the greatest achievement of the fellowship, is creating a community of people that have each other.
That's great. And also there needs to be numbers as well, isn't it? Because when you are,
there's definitely power in numbers.
yeah, because if you are the one,
The
or
only
two, or
one,
the few,
yeah.
then people will say,
But
"See?"
also, people need to see women who are different from each other. Women who are tall, women that are thin, women that are gorgeous, women that are ordinary looking. You need to see a variety of women in order to accept a woman as in this role, certain role. And, of course, as I now am maturing, how do you say that? I'm getting old. So, but, I don't see any older women in this field at all. So there's a whole challenge around aging as a woman that, I see a lot of old guys for sure.
95-year-olds.
95, yeah. That's young though. So that's a whole new sort of torch that I'm, out there
Yeah, you once
trying to
said
talk
you
about.
once said to me, "I want to be the first really old lady on the podium."
Really, I might be there already. Yeah.
No, you're not. Nothing like. Um, but do you think? I promise we'll leave this subject in a second. But do you think you said that some people think there's not a problem, but there's still um, I think when you left Baltimore, there's now. Am I right that there's now no woman in charge of a major American orchestra
Well,
again?
Natalie Stutzman
Oh
is in
yes,
Atlanta, but
yeah,
I mean, they're the top tier orchestras. When they select someone, they don't think of women.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, we don't need to go into that
No,
too
we
much,
don't.
but um, the I think that needs to change. Just like we need a woman president of the United States, and that will change. I think the culture ultimately. I certainly hope it will, but I think it's important to have one's eyes open that without the Me Too movement, I doubt anything would have changed,
Mhm.
to be perfectly honest. So I think that we need, in that case, to be extremely vigilant about continuing to push open the doors and really intentional, because I think if given the choice, most people would run back to
Mhm.
the old world.
It's still very much there, and
Hmm.
within the last 10 years, some very famous conductors have said some quite extraordinary things,
Yeah, let's not dwell
which
on that.
we
My
won't
God.
dwell on. um, not after Baltimore, at the same time as Baltimore, you went to Sao Paulo, which is another city with probably even greater social divisions, and this sort of gleaming concert hall in the middle of
Crackland.
crack cocaine land. Um, what was it like working there? How did that feel to? Because again, you toured that orchestra, you recorded with them, you did wonderful concerts, you took them to the proms in London.
Mhm.
Did you feel that it was possible to make a difference there, or is it just sort of
Oh
just
yeah,
yeah?
definitely. I think I went to Brazil as Tim Walker
Mhm.
from LPO said, "Please, you have to come. I'm consulting them. They want to, I want to
Mm.
bring up the level of guest conductors." I said, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to Brazil. No way." I
Mm.
mean, and so I went to Brazil, and you see Sao Paulo, and I was really cursing him on the whole taxi
Yeah.
ride. Sao Paulo is it's a city that they must have built the city when they had a sail on concrete.
Mm.
It's just a concrete jungle, and there's graffiti everywhere, and it's 20 million people. I mean, it's huge and sprawling, and then you get, as Gillian said, to this unbelievably gorgeous concert hall, a renovated train station in the middle of the most horrible neighborhood.
Mm.
Um, and then I met this orchestra. I was doing Mahler 7, I remember, and they were so hungry to play, and they were so musical and so responsive. And my manager said, don't have any ideas about if they ask you to be music director, don't do that because it's not a career move. And I said, okay, I'm definitely doing this because I think for me, it has to be about heart. It can't be about career. I mean, I care in a way just because the the higher level position one has, the more change one can affect. But I think if that's one's motivation, life is really too short. So and it was I was able to really put the orchestra on the map,
Mhm.
which
Yes.
which was wonderful. And it was a very different ethos. We could do things very quickly, very last minute,
Yeah.
all that kind of thing.
Very liberating.
Yeah.
I mean, something else that um, I've loved being involved in is the projects that we did together at the
Oh,
South
yeah.
Bank.
Fantastic.
And I mean, that raises for me an interesting um, question, which is about it seems to me that inspired and led by you, we were able to create a sort of broader idea in fact, a better idea, I think, of artistic excellence um, by making projects, big artistic projects, which were by their nature inclusive. I'm thinking of the Britain's War Requiem
Oh, yeah.
that
was
we
great.
did with all young people for the anniversary of the First World War. And it was all teenagers and, people who might have served and very young soloists and local kids from a,
And they did a video project
yes,
themselves. That was really
yes.
amazing too.
We made the young people the experts on the piece, so some local school children created a film about the war requiem and the history of the idea of the First World War and what came out of it. Interviewed Marin, interviewed a priest, and interviewed
great.
soldiers, and we also did Bernstein's Mass in this huge production with, I think it was
Was
400.
400 people?
It was 447 people on the stage, and I think something like 7 of them, including yourself and the guy who played the celebrant, were the professionals, and then everybody else we had young players, we had community choirs, homeless choirs,
Yeah.
and local kids performing. Lots of jeopardy, lots of risk. But I remember the Bernstein siblings coming and saying, this is how he would have wanted it. This is how he would have wanted
Yeah.
it. I mean, you've then gone on to do, Beethoven 9 in the same way all around the world. What's the challenge and what's the payoff of working in that way? Because it's a really important part of your work, and it's
Yeah.
in some ways quite
I
unique.
I think these sort of big concept projects that can open the doors to a lot of people who wouldn't feel comfortable coming into the concert hall, or certainly wouldn't feel comfortable on stage usually, but they'd like to be part of something important. Um, I think that's what art should be about, that it should be inclusive and it should be owned by everyone. Um, but the interesting thing is that, our our measuring of artistic excellence, I think, is so flawed because the human condition, I mean, it has to be about connection and interaction. And if you're trying to measure the excellence of something, I don't know, isn't that just a given
Yeah.
that you try to be
Yeah,
artistically
of
excellent in
course.
everything you do?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But in those projects, for me, that connection thing was just off the
Yeah,
scale.
it's off the charts. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's. I just really hope you continue to do those kinds of programs. I'm sure you
I
will.
will. I'm going to hear the Fidelio. Has anybody seen it yet? Here.
Mhm.
So this is my next big project.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I tell about it?
Yeah.
What I want to do anyway, because Beethoven's really one of my, besides
Mhm.
Bernstein, one of my heroes. And I really think that Fidelio has incredibly relevant themes, particularly for America right now. And it's about incarceration, and it's about unjust incarceration. And as we see, some people can be convicted and never incarcerated, and other people do just
Mhm.
small things and they're imprisoned unjustly for so
Decades. Mhm.
long. So I want to do a Fidelio that explores those themes and
Mhm.
possibly even work with incarcerated choirs.
Yes.
I think they'll have to be on video probably, but
Yeah.
so that's my next big project.
That's a thrilling prospect. Um, there's lots to ask you. I'm sure there'll be more questions. I just coming up right up to date. And please think if you want to ask. We will have about 10 minutes for questions. You're in Vienna with the Radio Symphony Orchestra. You're also with the orchestra in Katowice in Poland, the Polish
National
National
Polish.
Radio Orchestra. Um, I'm interested about Vienna. In the film, you talk about, um, you don't like rules, etc. And there you were going right into the center of, the hallowed tradition. And how does it feel when you're walking into the Musikverein or the concert house?
Oh God, I think one of the at least for me, personal highlights of my career was I just recorded Mahler 9 with my orchestra in Vienna in Musikverein, you know, standing at the same spot Bernstein stood and Mahler
And Mama
stood.
stood, yes.
So it was pretty awesome.
yeah.
But it's interesting because I think in some ways Vienna has been the most welcoming city of all. And maybe because they know they've been bad. You know, they haven't really addressed diversity or equality too much in the past. And I love the orchestra. It's at the moment it's struggling because like the BBC, you know, the media companies and radio orchestras are under threat everywhere. So
I'll bringing it back to this institution. What do you wish that you had been available to you when you were studying at Juilliard at Yale? What do you wish had been available to you as a student? You know, just talking to the all the teachers here and in terms of
oh yeah,
attitudes, in terms of
I think for me, one of the greatest disadvantages to going to conservatory, at least for me, was the lack of integration between departments or among departments, so that there was, you know, I was at Juilliard, I was a violinist, and you know, I never really interacted with the woodwinds or the brass. I mean, I had friends who played the instruments, but there was never a real crossover and a sense of, I don't know, a sense of sharing across boundaries, which I wish we had had more of. And maybe more big projects together where everybody could be involved. And I'm not so familiar here if there's a dance department, if there's a theater department. It's all music.
Yeah.
So, but
there's
maybe
pop-
there's jazz.
There's pop music, there's jazz.
So that's a way to cross over. But I really liked the vibe when I came in today with people hanging out. I thought that was really, really awesome.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
And right on the waterfront. I'm sure we have questions. I can't really see, but so if you have a question or a comment, please make yourself very, very obvious. Yeah, there's one there.
All right, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Marin, for sharing your insights with us. You said, for instance, about the fellowship
Yes.
of women conductor that you had, but later in the talk, you also said that our way of measuring artistic excellence is fraud. And I was thinking, by combining these two statements, what would be your opinion about conducting competitions which are open exclusively for women, like La Maestra in Paris?
Yeah, I was on the jury for the first two editions of La Maestra. And I don't know, you know, I have mixed feelings about it, of course. I think probably every woman in the competition has mixed feelings about it as well. But I think give us 100 years of having our own things, because you've had your own things for hundreds of years. And so give us 100 years and then let's have the talk. Okay? I think it's only fair. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That was it. That was a trick question too, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was very happy you said when I'm older, it's the next.
My next flag, yeah.
That's what I'm also conductor. I felt also okay. Now it's coming. Now coming more conductors, but now
Yeah.
there are no older women.
Yeah, so I won't please the young man here, but I was thinking of that we should have some kind of conducting, maybe not competition, not the word, maybe master classes or workshops, and you have to be over 40. For women over 40. What do you think? You know, because one of the challenges is, of course, that there's the young women are having more opportunities, which is fantastic. But we find for the fellowship that the largest applicant pool is between 31 and 50, because these are the women who sort of miss the chances that are now coming through. And I believe that conducting, that experience does help in conducting, and that, you know, the more mature you are and the more understanding you have, I think the deeper a conductor you can be. Yeah.
And as we said, there's plenty of very old men. It's like probably the only profession besides being president of the United States where you can
Oh,
be.
now. Yeah. They're young.
Yeah. Do we have others?
No, it looks like.
Is that it?
Okay.
One more? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a second try. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see it.
You referred to improvisation, and you mentioned how improvisation had liberated you in a musical way. And what do you think, in which way should improvisation be integrated in the curricula of conservatories?
Great question. Yeah, I think that, you know, I was brought up so, you know, so ingrained in the classical tradition. I mean, the Juilliard kind of approach. And the idea, my dad was concertmaster of New York City Ballet Orchestra, but he also played saxophone. And he played with a big band. He played clarinet and flute too, and he was a whistler. And my mother and I, my mother is a wonderful cellist, and we were both complete snobs, you know, and he would put on records and play along and, you know, with his saxophone and stuff. And my mother and I would be rolling our eyes, you know, oh my God. But once I started just kind of letting myself compose, you know, at will, it was really very freeing. And it also taught me a lot more about structure, about harmonic progression, about melody, everything. So I think, and I love working with soloists that improvise, you know, Mozart cadenzas and things like this. I find it very, very inspiring and really exciting. And I think that should be part of every musician's education. I don't know exactly how one would integrate it effectively into a conservatory curriculum, but you know,
There are.
orchids are pretty loose. We just say,
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
They play, you know. You set down a groove and
Yeah.
let's go.
Well, I've seen things happening here, and particularly with the projects where people are going to be doing outreach. And of course, the Guildhall School of Music in London, you know, decades ago, really created that kind of course where musicians were trained to be much more flexible because they would be going out into community situations, but not necessarily as a sort of end in itself artistically, which is another approach. Just to finish off, Marin, I mean, there are lots of young people here. What would your thought be for them? What would your advice be for them at the beginning of their lives in music?
Well, I think music is a fantastic career. I mean, to be able to do what you love and potentially make a living at it is a real privilege. And if you stop feeling that way, do something else. I think that I feel fortunate every single day. And I would also say that there's room for everyone. There's, you know, you don't have to have a career, a prescribed career. You can make your own career. You know, for me, my heroes are the conductors that work with the youth orchestras and are completely devoted and have these kids, you know, and have changed all these kids' lives. You don't have to conduct the, you know, Concertgebouw. There's places for everyone. And also as a musician, as a career musician, you can put together lots of different things. Don't just do one thing. You know, teaching, performing, chamber music, orchestra. You know, I would say that it's probably the most varied career you could have, and it's whatever you make. I really believe that we are the we are the creators of our own destiny. But music is a career that really lends itself to that. So I think,
Thank you. That's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much, Marin.
oh, thank
for
you. My
giving
pleasure.
us
Thank you,
that time.
Gillian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming.
That was great, Gillian. Thank you. Bravo. Thank you. Uh-oh.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you stayed to give the flowers, huh? Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's
Thank
very
you.
nice.
Thank you.
Here, we'll bow.